Oh, hello, folks. It's Ken David Stewart back with you again this afternoon with more from my podcast, The Weird and Fantastical Writings of Ken David Stewart. And I'm going to take you today right to the opening of Street Dreams. And I'll just go to my document right now, my Word document. It was back, big time. Harold Peyton found himself in the clutches of the most devastating episode of clinical depression that he'd ever experienced in his 65 years. He was used to this. Harold suffered from the type of depression that was episodic in nature. He was not depressed all the time, but large chunks of his life had been lost. During this time, Harold would succumb to the vast darkness of depression, what Winston Churchill famously described as his black dog. Harold just wanted to shut down and block out the whole world. He sat in a broken down office chair, adorned with torn upholstery. Harold was a published author and was working on a new mystery novel. The problem was he couldn't get his muse turned on. Every time he tried to think of a new idea to move his plot along, his mind just went blank. Harold just stared at the blank Word document on his computer screen. Everything that he attempted was hard. Harold was grateful that he had a month's holiday left from his part-time job as a substitute teacher. To do a job like that, you have to be able to get yourself pumped up and be able to think very sharply. Right now, Harold could do neither. That was the introduction. Now we'll go to episode 2. Harold was exceptionally fit. Just a slight delay here while I get my arrows set up properly. Okay, episode 2 again. Harold Peyton was exceptionally fit and healthy for a 65-year-old male. He was once a heavy smoker, but overcame his addiction to cigarettes around 20 years ago. Harold made his physical fitness regimen a top priority in his life. He rode his prized black and white giant mountain bike every day, even during inclement weather. On alternate days, Harold would go to Shape's gym for a 45-minute resistance training workout. Although he was still a bit on the pudgy side, he carried his excess weight well and was still a physically attractive man. Harold looked at least 10 years younger than his chronological age. Harold lived in a modest home in the suburb of Elmwood, in the windy city of Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. He loved animals and was presently the proud owner of 2 dogs and 2 cats. Following the frustration of 15 minutes of totally unproductive writing, Harold got out of his office chair and walked over to the burgundy-colored drapes of his picture window. He tugged on the cord that opened the curtains and gazed upon the outside world. The city of Winnipeg experienced an early bitter winter during November 2019. The picture window was covered with intermittent patches of frost and snow. Snow was now falling very heavily. Harold honestly enjoyed the winter season, especially fresh snowfalls. He loved the way the tree branches looked when they were covered by shiny white snowflakes. Episode 3 and 4. Today, the beauty of the winter season had little effect upon Harold's somber mood. When he was trapped in this mental state, he was unable to bring himself to experience joy in things and activities that once brought him pleasure. It was as if his happy button had been turned to the off position. Harold thought of his ex-wife Clarissa. They'd been divorced nearly 5 years now. Harold missed Clarissa, but he did not blame her for living with him. What woman could live with the frequent intense darkness of his moods? During these times, Harold would totally ignore her as he closed himself off from the entire world. After staring out of his picture window for about 2 minutes, Harold could hear his dogs barking loudly and sharply. He soon realized what was upsetting them. A white Ford 150 truck was parked directly across the street from Harold's house. He could see a large burly man with black hair in the driver's seat. The man appeared to be in his early 30s. and he was very angry at a young female who was possibly in her 20s. Harold watched as the young man pushed his female passenger out of his truck and onto the ice-packed snow covering the road. He then tossed a large orange and turquoise-colored duffel bag onto the street. It almost hit the young woman who was lying prostrate on the ground. The angry male in the truck yelled a few vile obscenities at his female victim and then drove away swiftly in his Ford 150. Looking through his picture window, Harold watched the young woman slowly and painfully rise to her feet. She was wearing only a gray hoodie, sweatshirt, black sweatpants with a tear in one knee, and a pair of well-worn red Converse running shoes. She was now standing in the street, shivering on a cold day in March. A black Honda Accord honked loudly at her as he came close to colliding with the girl, who now had tears streaming down her cheeks. Episode 5. Harold watched after the Ford 150 truck drove away. He stood and stared at the young woman and started to think what he was going to do about her. Harold didn't even consider calling the police. Instead, he opened the front door of his house and called loudly to the girl in distress. "Come here, young lady. You need to get out of the cold or you'll freeze to death." The young female looked towards Harold with a confused and frightened look. She wiped the snowflakes off her hoodie and walked awkwardly towards a door that Harold was holding open for her. "Thank you very much, mister. You may have saved my life. May I come into your house to warm up for a while?" "Step into the living room and make yourself at home," Harold replied. "Thanks. Hey, I should introduce myself. My name is Whisper," the strange young woman said. She found a place to sit on Harold's yellow and orange patterned sofa. Whisper admired the brass antique lamp to the left of the sofa. The full decor of Harold Peyton's living room had the ambiance that could only come from a man who appreciated fine art. "Could I interest you in a cup of Tim Hortons coffee, or perhaps a mug of hot chocolate?" Harold asked. "By the way, Whisper is a beautiful name. Who gave you that name?" My grandmother came up with it, if I remember correctly," Whisper replied. While standing in the hall, Harold now had a good opportunity to observe Whisper. Her hair was blonde, highlighted by orange streaks. Presently looked wet and tangled. There were still some snowflakes in her hair. Whisper's makeup was smudged and smeared from her tears. Whisper had a gold rod piercing through her nose. She wore orange lipstick and had a pentagram tattoo on her left forearm. She was not very attractive and was slightly overweight, giving her somewhat of a pudgy look. Harold thought that Whisper resembled a terribly neglected little elf. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it at there today. So it went from the introduction, episode 1 through 5 today. And next time we'll start with episode 6. I hope you're enjoying these podcasts. One person wrote me a comment back that really blessed me. She said she really enjoyed what I was doing and my blogs and my podcasts, and paraphrasing basically to keep up the good work. And like I said, I was really happy to receive that comment. Okay, this is Ken David Stewart signing off, wishing you a good afternoon.